Okay, learning target 5 retake video. Interpret dot plots, histograms, and box plots for data on a real number line. Probably the most common error here for the writing the question portion of it was that I saw a lot of questions that weren't really related to the data. So if it said number of students and these are their test scores, questions I would see would be something like what class is this in, or what school do they go to, or something. Okay, those are questions that cannot be answered using this histogram, but they're not really related to the data. So probably some more kind of appropriate questions would be, what was the mean test score? You can't really tell from this histogram what the mean or the average score was. And then if you want to pick out like a specific value, so like how many students scored a 53? Well, we know that there were 2 students between a 50 and a 60, but we don't know if either one of those 2 students got a 53 or if both got a 53. Okay. Write a general statement about the scores that the students received on their final. You could say something like, most students scored a 70 or better. Very few students scored a 50 or lower. More students passed than failed. Okay, you can easily see that from the number of students that are in this range, above 50 compared to below 50, or 60 rather. Okay, so those would be some more appropriate questions and general statements that could be made from the histogram. Okay. The next part of this from your test was these 4 box plots, and you had to pick 2 of them and then talk about the numbers from the 5-number summary and kind of compare them against each other. So some examples here would be, if you're looking at box plot A, the maximum and the 3rd quartile are the same value. You could also say that the minimum and the 1st quartile are the same value. If you're looking at box B, it just has this line with the dot right there. That means that all 5 numbers in this 5-number summary, the min, max, median, Q1, and Q3, are all the same value. Okay. Box plot C, the median, Q1, and Q3 are all the same number. That's why we just have the one line here. There's no actual box. And then part D, the median, Q1, Q3, and max are all at this same point, are all the same value. The minimum is different, but that's the only difference. Otherwise, all 4 of those other numbers are the same. Okay. And then the last part of this learning target showed a dot plot here. So to give the 5-number summary, the min value for this would be 0. The max would be 7. The median would be between 1 and 2, so it would be 1.5. And then the Q1 is going to be 1. The Q3 is going to be 3. Probably the most common thing that I saw here was just miscalculating the Q3. I saw a lot of 2.5s for the Q3, and similarly I saw a lot of 0.5s for the Q1. The IQR, the interquartile range, that's just the difference between the 2 quartiles. Okay. There weren't a ton of errors here. Probably the main thing was just if you had one of these quartiles wrong, the IQR is obviously going to be wrong. This should be 3 minus 1, so you should get an IQR of 2. Is 7 an outlier? That's kind of a judgment call. I would say yes, though, because it's pretty far away from the rest of the data. 4 is obviously not an outlier because there's one person with 4 siblings and a person right next door with 3 siblings. but there's nothing really between the 4 and the 7. So yes, I would call that an outlier. The range of the data then, we'll just take our maximum minus the minimum, 7 minus 0, and we get a range of 7. So that's what you should have had for that part of the test. Okay. There are going to be 3 practice problems for this section. Here's the first one. It says, write a general statement about the data and write a question that cannot be answered by the histogram below. So go ahead, pause the video, write those 2 things, and then check back for a couple examples. So here are some examples of some general statements and some questions, or some questions that can be answered by, that could not be answered by this histogram. So what was the lowest number of points, if this is like points scored in a bunch of different basketball games or something? We don't know what the lowest number of points ever scored was. Okay, these values in here between 1 and 5, they could all be 5. We don't know that. What is the average number of points scored, over however many games are here? We don't know that either. The mean, the average, can't figure that out from just the histogram. And then how many times did the player score 18 points, if ever? Okay, so we know that there are 50 times where the player scored between 16 and 20 points, but we don't know if they ever actually scored 18 or how many times that might have occurred. General statements that you could say about the histogram, you could say, for the most part, the player had more games with 11 or more points than they did with 10 or fewer. You could say the player had most of their games between scoring 16 to 20 points. You could say something about the number of times that they scored just 1 to 5 points being very low compared to the rest. Okay, so some just sort of general statement like that. Here is your next practice problem. Describe the relationship between the numbers in the 5-number summary in the following box plot. Okay, so here's this box plot. Make a couple comparisons between numbers in the 5-number summary. So here are some of the comparisons that you could have made between the 5 numbers represented by this box plot. You could have said that the Q3, the third quartile, is only slightly larger than the median. Looks like there might only be a difference of like 1 there. The first quartile is only slightly larger than the minimum. Here's the minimum, here's the first quartile. You could also say something about the variation or the spread. So you could say that there's not much variation in the data. You could find that by looking at the min and max, and there's not a whole lot of difference between the min and max. You could also tell that from the Q1 and Q3, or the interquartile range. Comparing those two, there's not a whole lot of variation between Q1 and Q3. Here is the last practice problem then. So it's got this box plot. Find the 5-number summary for this box plot. Okay, so pause and then unpause when you're ready for the solution. Okay, so here it looks like the minimum is 5. The maximum is up here at 50. The maximum occurs twice. We're going to go ahead and find the median. We'll just start crossing off values. And it is between 35 and 40. So we'll say halfway between there is 37.5. So we'll say the median is 37.5. Okay. Our Q1 then, we'll find half the distance between the median and the minimum. And it looks like it's halfway between 25 and 30. So we'll say 27.5. The Q3 then is just the midway point between the median and the max. And that is 45. Okay, so there is the 5-number summary for the data represented by this box plot. Okay, so you are all done with the practice problems. You're ready for the retake.